thanks a lot for replying, man. I appreciate your effort. I really appreciate your creativity. That's quite a tale that you wove there. A few thoughts. Now, you say that you would like to offer theft of the body as a single event that explains all 5 facts. But, yeah, that's really not the case. I mean, at best it explains the empty tomb. And that's really about all it explains. Because, you went and you add explanation after explanation after explanation. And what we end up with is a kind of a convoluted combination theory. An empty tomb, yeah, I mean, someone could have stolen the body, but that's not going to impress Paul. And you sort of concede Paul's conversion, but I mean, it wouldn't impress James. And your theory about James just has no evidence at all to support it, other than just a conjecture. But the empty tomb was actually that's what the earliest thing the Jews claimed, was that the disciples stole the body. And in the Gospel of John, we find Mary Magdalene, the first thing that she thought, she didn't think resurrection. She went and told someone took the body. In fact, nobody believed by the empty tomb except for John in the Gospel of John. And John was the only one, and the rest of them were skeptical from the empty tomb. Collective hallucinations, I mean, yeah, groups claim to see the Virgin Mary and things like that. I'll give you that. That does happen even in a modern context. But it really does not explain what the disciples claim. Because, I mean, you read the accounts, they talk about touching him, they talk about him seeing him eating with him. And in fact, I wasn't going to, try to use the Bible to prove the Bible the way that we get accused of. But you entered as evidence of a collective hallucination, Matthew 28. What was it you used? Matthew 28, 16 through 17. And right above it in verse 9, when Jesus appears, it talks about they grabbed his feet and worshipped him. Look at verse 9, right above what you used as a collective hallucination. Not possible. They physically touched him. That's not an hallucination. And just in group hallucinations are very dubious anyway. I mean, it doesn't really wash. I also thought it was very interesting that you, when you try to explain Paul's conversion as some kind of guilt thing. Number one, there's really no evidence that Paul felt guilty until after the fact. None of his actions were. In fact, on the road to Damascus, he was going to persecute some Christians. That's what happened when Jesus. That's his own words. He wasn't feeling guilty, and he didn't believe until he saw Jesus. I thought it was really interesting you mentioned Isaiah 53 as a potential. I don't believe that anyone interpreted it as the nation back in that day. I think it was widely viewed as messianic. Read the passage. Read the passage. You don't see a nation there at all. That was a 3rd century polemic developed by the rabbis who were getting tired of having to try to explain that passage away, because it describes Jesus to a T. In fact, it even describes his death and resurrection 700 years before the fact. That's just clear evidence that Jesus was who he said he was. Isaiah 53. It's not the nation never had its beard pulled. The nation was never righteous anyway. Not to the extent to atone for the sins. Was the nation a man of sorrows? A man? It says that it's a man. It's pretty obviously Jesus Christ, 7 years in advance. There's no evidence that James was a con man. This is completely contrived. See, this is what happens when you develop a combination theory. You start stretching things beyond credulity. No scholar believes James was a con man. It just reveals how weak the necromancers stole the body explanation really is, because there's you just pile up conjecture on conjecture, and with probabilities, the more things you add, the less probable the case is, and if one point fails, the whole case fails. So it becomes what we call ad hoc. It's contrived, and it's obviously contrived. And Jason, I appreciate you said that it was kind of for fun, and so I see where you're getting with that, because you say right at the first 24 seconds of your video that you don't even believe this tale. So why would I? Why would anyone? You know, I think implicit in the challenge is that you're trying to really explain the evidence. It's not a game. I mean, yeah, it's fun to discuss these things sometimes, but it's not really a game. I'd like to know what you actually believe. I mean, you said if you don't believe it, no one else is going to believe it. Obviously, it's not believable. It just kind of shows how elegant the truth is, because the fact of the resurrection explains all the facts with one simple explanation. Thanks for your video.